guys, it's Valentina, and today I'm going to cover how to do advanced remappings for controller. And if you're thinking, wait a second, Squint, didn't you already do a video like that? I did! For Steam Controller API. This one's going to be using AntiMicro. For those of you who have been having trouble, this could be an alternative, but I will warn you, if you have the ability to go with Steam, I would recommend that, and if you don't, I would recommend going with Steam support and trying that instead, because this will have a little bit more configuration involved, and while the Steam configurations are only in Steam, you can do everything there, for AntiMicro, you will have to change your keybinds in Final Fantasy XIV, and so that makes it quite a bit more involved and a bit riskier. I would strongly suggest that first you try this on an alt, and that when the time comes for you to do this on your real characters, you take a lot of before screenshots just in case. And, make sure you have enough time to undo whatever you did. If you have raid, please don't be that person who changes their settings 1 hour before raid and then blames me when they can't figure out how to bring it back. Please don't. Okay, anyway, AntiMicro, let's go. First things first. In AntiMicro, you will see your controller, hopefully. As you can see on my screenshot, or video capture, it's recognizing 3 controllers. Gamepad 1, Gamepad 2, and wireless controller, also known as GameCube Controller 1, GameCube Controller 2, there really isn't one, but it has to show up, and PlayStation Controller. The reason I am showing these is not just to show you that you can choose different controllers, but as you see in my wireless controller, I have options for up, down, left, and right for sticks and D-pad, but for some reason on the gamepad controller, I only have it for the D-pad. The reason is that if you want the full options, you will first have to map the controller itself to a theoretical controller. And if that sounds like weird stuff, just press a button right here that says controller mapping, and you press your buttons and assign all of these to what it should be. So the reason it's showing up for wireless controller to have my sticks is because I already went through and did all of this. This also has the benefit of renaming here so you know exactly what you're editing. Whereas for the gamepad it says button 1, 2, 3, 4. It gets really annoying. So I do recommend you actually go and do your controller mapping first. Now that your controller itself is mapped, you're going to need to map it to the game. And this is going to be a bit more complicated. You see, right now I have it set to enable gamepad, what you expect, right? And my configuration is completely done, which means I should be able to strafe because I've set that up. And yet, it's not doing it. If I go really lightly, it does it. But if I go really hard on my analog sticks, it doesn't. Why is that? Well, see, in Steam, it completely steals your controller. But in AntiMicro, it doesn't do that. Because it's not trying to be a full controller remapper, it is a controller to keyboard mapper. It's not even specific to a game. Whatever you change here is going to be changed even if you're in Notepad, I guess. Whatever it is else you have open. As long as it's the active window. It's essentially pretending to be a keyboard. So because of that, we will turn gamepad off. I would also recommend that you turn direct chat off as well. Though depending on how you go about doing this, you may not have to, but I highly recommend it. So keybind. So if AntiMicro is actually a keyboard mapper, how do we use this for controller? And this is where keybind comes in. If you go to your gamepad section in keybinds, you probably see that I have things you do not. And you should map all of these. Now, I'm using the alt layer as in I'm using a lot of Alt plus something, but not for everything. I don't do it for my modifiers, so L1, L2, R1, R2, and also I don't do it for start and select just because for some reason they weren't playing very nice with it. Otherwise I would have. But definitely don't do it for your modifiers. But for everything else like D-pad and face buttons, as well as my analogs, I am using Alt. And one of the reasons I do that is because I play on PC. I play on both controller and mouse. I use mouse and keyboard for PvP, or for other things like maybe my retainers every once in a while, or crafting, whatever I feel like. I just switch all the time. And so I have to be very careful that I don't take things away that I already have bound elsewhere. It will warn you, don't worry. The game will tell you if you're about to remove a key binding and what the key binding is. Maybe you're totally okay with removing it. But yeah, you will need to actually assign all these. And then, you need to make sure that mapping is the same in AntiMicro, because what's going to happen is AntiMicro will map your controller to the keyboard, and then Final Fantasy XIV will map your keybind to its version of the controller, the gamepad. So, for example, D-pad up, I have Alt Num 8, and then if I go here, on my D-pad up, and I go to Advanced, Assignments, Alt, and Num 8. If I want to add another one, I would click here and add that as well. It defaults to keyboard, blank or keyboard. So you don't have to worry, just press and assign them. If you want a trigger, it's a little bit different, it's over here, right there. And then it works the same. I didn't use advanced because I only have one, I literally just picked the keybind here. But if you want to do two at the same time, you'll have to go to advanced. And so that's what I did. Up, down, left, right are essentially the 2, 4, 6, 8. And my face buttons are 1, 3, 7, and 9. For start and select, since it wasn't playing very nice with Alt, I went with single apostrophe and /. And then for L2 and R2, the brackets, and for L1 and R1, comma and period. L3 and R3, I went with numpad period, and numpad 5, and then for up, down, left, and right, I went with WASD, but remember, these are all Alt layers. The only ones that don't have Alt layers are my start, select, L1, R1, L2, R2. All of these have Alt added to the combination. And for my right analog, I did the arrows. So that way it simulates what it's like when I'm playing normally on keyboard if I accidentally mess up or something. And mostly I just didn't want to have to change my regular key bindings. I am using an Alt though, just in case. Just in case. So, once you have everything perfect in your first one, which it doesn't have to be, but you'll probably want to pick the first one, make sure you test it, that your controller comes out exactly as you expect it without any advanced mappings, right? This is just, I'm mapping the controller exactly as it is, everything should work perfect, no issues. To rename it, to rename the set in AntiMicro, you click on Sets, go to Settings, and you click and you change the name. And this will change it at the bottom of the tab. And so when I start AntiMicro, I wanted to start on the first one, which is what I named default. And you want to make sure you always have the correct one at the beginning. Ideally, you want the first one because that's what it's going to default to. It just makes it easier. But if I were to edit R1, when I'm done editing, I want to make sure I click on default. Because it's very important. It's not quite as smart as Steam. You need to actually go back to where you're starting from. So once you've assigned everything, comes the customizations. So let's do the 3 examples that I did in Steam. Alright, so the first example I'm going to show was my Autorun, which I did as R2, start. to do that, I picked a layer for my R2, which I decided to name R2. And then I went copy and default, and that completely copied into it everything that was in there already. You have to do that. It's not going to be like in Steam, where it's going to assume that if something is not bound, let's go to, something I didn't use before, it just says no key. It's not going to assume to go back to anything, because AntiMicro itself has actually no concept of a default. It's just, these are the layers. So before you change, copy everything from the one that is perfect. Then, I went to my start. I went to mouse, because I want to be Autorun, and I don't want it to be R, because I'm using Alt for a lot of things, and I didn't change the Alt-R keybind, which is reply, and I don't want to reply in the middle of battle. I really don't. So, mouse, middle button. And that's one of the advantages of picking the same layer, is that you should go through all of these and see where you might have potential issues if you decide to bind something extra. And by picking Alt, the only things I have to worry about are in the chat tab, and so I could literally remove all of these except for the ones I actually use, which is only Alt-R. It's literally the only one I ever use, so I could just remove all of these and just make sure to never use R. And that's why I picked Alt. But obviously, if you're actually playing, like many people do play on both controller and mouse and keyboard, and you're using Alt for other things, you may want to have to reconsider. But anywho, once I've assigned my start to the mouse middle button, I need to be able to go from my default layer to my R2 layer. So my trigger, I click on my binding, go to advanced, and I go to set selector, and I picked R2 while held. If you're using one way, it will switch but not come back. If you're doing two-way, it will also switch and not come back, but it just means that now if you press the button again, it can switch back. But it's not a held, it's just press and then press. So if you want it held, which you most likely do, pick while held. And then it will automatically switch back when you stop holding it. And this will actually apply it to both layers if you're using while held, so you don't have to go to that one and then go to this one. It will automatically add the set one while held to go back. And that will add Autorun. So remember, here, set selector, and then on the one where you want to assign it, start, change it to whatever you want, which in my case was middle button. The second example was Strafe. Oh yeah, Strafe, let's do that. So, for my Strafe, I want to use R1, and I still want to use my analog stick. You can see it light up. So my R1 is period, and my analog stick is Alt, and then WASD for the most part. Right, this is when I use it normally, it's going to be Alt WASD. But when I want to strafe, I need to actually use Q and E because there is no strafe on the controller itself without changing your camera type, which you probably don't want to do. So same idea. In the R shoulder, in addition to its keybind, right, you can see it in current, but you can also see it in assignments, which is period. In set selector, it's set to, when I'm holding it, go to R1. And then in R1, all I did is I changed my left and my right to Q and E. Of course, when I made R1, the layer, once again, I used set, copy, and I copied from default. That's how I started it. But then all I had to do was just change Q and E. And now I got strafing. There we go. very important, when you are done editing something, or showing somebody something like I am in a video, always go back to default, because otherwise it will mess it up, or set 1. It's called set 1. The last example was, how do I use an extra button to maybe do a double tap? Can that be done in AntiMicro? And the answer is yes. Now, admittedly, I don't have a controller with a paddle or a grip, so I don't know how that would affect it in controller mapping, whether AntiMicro would actually show it, but I do have one extra button on the controller, which is share, right? Because I decided to go with a very PS4 style setup of my start is options and my HUD is clicking in, which I actually don't like, but I wanted to do it just like the PS4 players have it. Which means share is available as an extra button because we don't have things to share. There's no reason for me to assign it to a screenshot because I can just reach with my keyboard. Or do the screenshot combination that already exists in the game. So I'm going to use share. And so in default, and this is great because I don't need a special layer for this. It's going to be in default, and because I copied R2 and R1 from default, and this was already done in there, it's actually in all of them. At least it should be, if I did it properly. It's not in R2. Definitely something I want to make sure later on that it is. Actually, no, I don't really need to, because if I'm using R2, I'd probably just... yeah. Anyway, it's right here. And I go to advanced. My assignment is my right, which in this case is right bracket, a pause for 0.10, and then another right bracket, which my right bracket is what I assigned to R2, and then it will pause and then do it again. But it will do it quickly, and therefore it actually is a double tap. So, when you add something, let me show you, it automatically defaults to blank a keyboard and you just put in your keyboard, like this. And then if you want to add pause, you click here, pause, and then click on insert. And of course delete this one. Delete, because I don't want that in there. That was just for the sake of showing that. I could do it all over. Let me do clear all. Pause. Insert. I am on default. And there we go. So that is the end of this video. As you can see, everything I want is right here. And I will see you for whatever else I decide to make. If you have any questions or issues, feel free to comment, or if you would like me to try some other software. I did try DS for Windows. Unfortunately, I'm having a little bit of trouble with it, and I think it's because the software has not been maintained in a while. So, yeah. Would have been really nice though, because it does actually steal the controller. Though I was looking around at its, setup for advanced things, and the UI kind of sucks. It's great for the basic stuff, but for advanced, oof. Didn't seem so hot anyway. But yeah, I shall see you later, or not see you. Bye bye!